Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and coming to this our Atheist House Tamil. So first, this session is being recorded. So having said that, today is Sunday morning. I know people will get up late, maybe by 11 or 11:30, but it will be so delayed from for you as well. So we started off a bit early. 10:30 is a bit early, but still this session is recorded, so people can hear what we have discussed later on. This is the first session that we are going to have it in English. So the rabbi who has uh, come here as our guest to discuss on Judaism is an Orthodox rabbi. As you are aware, Orthodox or deeply religious people. So he is a deeply religious rabbi, and his name is Rabbi Asher Meidza. He is right now serving as a rabbi, and you can visit his website, torahjudaism.org. And he is very few of Orthodox rabbis. In fact, I would say he's the only one Orthodox rabbi right now who is more willing to teach Torah and Judaism to non-Jews. He's very open about it, and if you will check his YouTube channel, you could see him debating with Karaite Jews, other Orthodox Jews, and then with some atheists, and then Muslim imams. And he's very interested in Indian culture. And I've invited him to our atheist house because we keep talking about many religions. And this is the first time we have invited a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, a Jewish rabbi. This is like I will ask him questions and he will answer. And then if he has questions on atheism, he will ask to me and I will reply to that. And then again, I will give a rebuttal on his Judaism. So, Rabbi, you want to add something?
Everything you said was great. Thank you for having me.
All right. I'll just invite one person, like from as a moderator in between you and me. So just in case if this group gets disconnected, I don't want, because Clubhouse has the one bad feature. If there is bad internet from your end and my end, this group will be closed. So again, it's tough to invite all people back. So I'll just invite Ilango or Sapien to come up. Ilango or Sapien, can you come up and be as a moderator? Just in the stage. We don't want you to talk, but just you can be in the stage.
இல்லை
Sapien
நான்
bro,
மேலே
மேல
தான்
வரீங்களா?
இருக்கேன்.
மேல
நான்
தான்
மேலே
இருக்கீங்களா?
தான் இருக்கேன். ஆமாம், ரிஸ்வின் இருக்காரு.
ஒரு ரிஷ்வன் இருக்காரா? Okay.
ரிஃப்ரெஷ்
Okay.
பண்ணுங்க.
I just refreshed. Okay. Okay. I got it. நான் எல்லாத்தையும் moderator பண்ணி விட்டுறேன். Okay, Rabbi. So let me start the dialogue. So the first question is, what is God according to you in Judaism? So if you could explain, then we will proceed. Like why we deny such a God? Is there any chance for us to deny such a God? So could you please explain in maybe in 5 minutes or something, what is God in Judaism and what he has to do with people and how he created? Go on.
Sure. God to us is the great lawgiver. We always teach that the reason we believe in God is because of the Torah, because of our source material, not the other way around. The reason God is special to us is essentially because God is good. He describes himself as someone one can emulate, and by emulating, not only will your life improve, your surroundings will also improve. That's essentially who God is for us as Jews. Someone who has given us a standard, has elevated us up from the animal. He's given us a higher standard to aspire to. And as followers of this lawgiver, we try to encourage other people to keep this law. This law is essentially what separates us from every other belief system. That's how we know who you worship, depending on what that God expects from you. Our God expects from us to keep his instructions. They're detailed, they're outlined in what we call the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. There's around 613 of these instructions, and that's how we please this God, by keeping his commands, his code. I don't think I'll need 5 minutes to respond to that question.
Okay. So you believe, okay, we as an atheist, we don't believe there is something called a personal God sitting up there. So our question comes is like, when you say if God is good, so we take it like, what goodness is. Goodness is something that we understand that, one who gives food, one who nourishes us, one who protects us from diseases. But the world that I see nowhere I could see there is goodness. But I could only see, some goodness. Yes, there is goodness. Yes, there are people who could afford for food. But does that happen all the time? No, there are wars, there are famines, there are cyclones, there are earthquakes. So first concept is, so if you believe that Judaism says my God is good, then the question comes, is he really good? So and I read Torah and I find out that many instances God was very jealous and he was like more like a cruel dictator. So how would you respond to
Mhm.
that question?
So I didn't say that our book tells us that God is good. Our book shows us that God is good. I started off saying that the reason I believe in God is because of Torah, meaning that I don't believe in Torah because of God, i.e., revelation. Meaning this book first had to make God likable to us. We first needed to have the ability to in some way decide if this new idea would be a net gain versus a net loss for the world. Now, it's true that there are things in this book that I have to contend with, things that don't always make ethical sense to me. And I think that the better way to gauge this is by asking, what does an atheist have to contend with? Meaning that as much as I have to contend with, right, with things that don't make sense to me in this book, an atheist really has to contend with everything else, meaning he has no book. He or she has the difficult task of trying to come up with reasons why we're here, why I can't kill shoplifters or people who don't wear masks. An atheist is philosophically left alone to reinvent the wheel ethically himself. And being that every atheistical society has only left a trail of death and carnage, that shows how well they're doing with that. Meaning that this main book or code, this is essentially what has helped us civilize the world, not Plato's Republic or Aristotle's works on ethics or the Odyssey or the Iliad. It's essentially this book or these set of books in what we call the Bible.
All right, I'll the question you also have put a subtle question that atheists
Mhm.
lack. We don't have a proper philosophical, I mean, ethical grounds. Well, we decide our grounds based on our survival, which I would explain you later on evolutionary biology. So first,
Mhm.
so you understand that Torah gives ethics. So according to you, the Torah has said that it's okay to beat a slave, so and have a slave. So you are, which means like do you acknowledge that? Is it anyway sensible for a human to treat another human as a slave? Like for 7 years he has to be like a slave, and seventh year he wants to free, you have to cut off his ring his ears or something. Like you have a verse in Torah
Mhm.
like that. So how you think these are ethics? And then if a woman is not a virgin, you can stone her to death.
Mhm.
So you believe that this is ethics?
No. So the notion of a slave in the Torah is twofold. There's two types of slaves. There's a Gentile slave and a Jewish slave. In terms of a slave that goes free automatically after 7 years, that's only a voluntary slave. That is a Jewish slave who needs the money. And there's some people who really would rather be taken care of than control their own lives. That's one side of the coin, is the notion of indentured servitude. That, alongside with people who are captured in wars. However, these slaves are not permanent slaves. These slaves could actually go free if they're able to change their behavior by essentially becoming fully Jewish themselves. Because in Judaism, when we take a slave for ourselves, we partially convert them to our religion. And by fully becoming Jewish, they can free themselves. The notion of slavery is not new to this planet. As a matter of fact, America has one of the greatest incarceration rates seen anywhere. Now, I don't know what you would call that, but a slave. People who are forced to live in cages for things they have done. There's many times that people living in those cages are the very combatants that we faced in the battlefield. We have a place called Guantanamo where we keep Al Qaeda people who were trying to harm us. Why is that any different? This notion that everyone should have the right to live freely, no matter how they think or how they behave, it in itself is a barbaric one. The notion that there's no standards, that everything is allowed. No, slavery many times is necessary, although there are some cruel examples of it, like the transatlantic slave trade, that the Bible does not condone kidnapping individuals and making them work for you. But in terms of grabbing combatants, people who are trying to harm you, and in some way trying to civilize them into your philosophy, and once they're willing to adopt your philosophy, you free them. This is what the Torah teaches. I have a whole video called Slavery and Judaism. Just look it up on YouTube, and I bring down all the sources. It's not as cruel as people make it seem. Now, there are some parts of the Torah that I don't have such an eloquent response for. And these, like I said, are things I have to contend with, but they're minimal. You have to bring up a better example than slavery. I'm pretty sure you don't know many Jewish people who have slaves. I mean, we have the internet. If it was such a great part of our religion, we'd see more Jews with slaves, right? I mean, slavery is still alive and well in the world in places like Saudi Arabia, in Muslim countries, but not in Israel. Jews do not just take people as slaves.
Okay, so I understand that you wage a war with a neighboring country, and then those people who lost the battle, you take them as slaves and they work for you. And if they want to become a Jew, you free him up. So that's what I understand in a short summary. Yeah.
Well, before we go to combat with anyone, assuming we were living in a proper Jewish nation with a king and a priest and a court, we would first offer those individuals peace. And we also have a law that whenever we besiege a city, we always allow one portion of that city open for people to run away. That means people are not forced into battle. However, those who are dedicated to your destruction, I think it's almost an act of decency to not just slaughter them completely, especially when they've given up, but to give them a way out. Now, this is, of course, post the conquest of Israel. There were different laws that were applicable before Israel became a nation with actual borders. There was an exception made with the 7 Canaanite nations, especially nations that tried to harm Israel. And these are exceptions that we see where Israel was not as hospitable because those neighbors were essentially trying to eliminate Israel. When Israel's attacked, even in wars of expansion, I'm talking about biblical Israel, the rules are pretty decent compared to how other nations, for example, at that time, we can't forget Genghis Khan, how people like this waged war. I don't think Israel has a track record for cruelty, or for bloodshed, for carnage, like Rome and Greece had. As a matter of fact, it's actually the Jewish God, the notion that we have a God that just by emulating him, your life and your society would improve. If we compare this to, let's say, Hindu gods or gods of Greek or Roman mythology, those gods behave worse than people. They themselves would kill. They themselves would rape.
Okay, so you said destroying an entire nation is applicable only to 7 Canaanite nations. So I am thinking as one of the 7 Canaanite nations. And yeah, maybe my parents, would have thought to kill the Jews or the Israelites. But I'm a small boy. Why does God intend me to be slain as well? Because if you read in Torah, it is specifically mentioned, do not leave even the sheeps, even the cows. And he has given even one point, like in Tanakh, we could read that God was really angry with Saul because he did not kill all the Amalekites, and he took some of the cows and sheep. So what mistake did I do? I mean, I don't find your God as a justifying or a good God here.
Mm-hmm. So again, there's a handful of instances in the Torah that we have to respond to. A handful, and they're always the ones specifically used by atheists to try to ridicule our religion. However, one, that's not in the Torah. Like you correctly said, that's an instance that happened in the book of Samuel. As a defender of the Torah, I don't think I have to defend on legends and what we call Midrash and Agadah, which is essentially what a historical book would be. The notion that Samuel chastised King Saul for not even killing the animals and destroying even their pots is not something I think I have to contend for. There's actually one instance that something similar appears in the Torah, and it's not God commanding them to do it, it's actually Moses. There is no instance in the Torah where God specifically commands the Israelites to kill all women and children and leave none of them alive. In context, you will see that it's Samuel in one instance, which is not in the Torah, and there's one instance where Moses said it. Now, Moses is human. Moses many times made mistakes. I'm just trying to be accurate to the text and answer your question the best way I can. I deal a lot with very intelligent, inquisitive people who really want to learn about my religion, and it doesn't do my religion a favor by giving inaccurate information. Like I said, there are things in my religion that I have to contend with. A handful of things. I would say around 98, 99% of the Torah, I can justify, I can teach from an ethical perspective. And that 1 or 2% that I have problems with, I'll acknowledge it. Absolutely. That's actually something I ask a lot of atheists if they ever doubt their atheism. If you would ask this to any religious person, they would say absolutely. Religious people always doubt, constantly doubt their religions. There was a famous Indian nun by the name of Mother Teresa. Her diary is riddled with instances where she would doubt belief in God. It's normal, it's healthy for honest individuals to say that sometimes they doubt their religion. Would you say that you ever doubt your atheism?
No, okay. There are some things that, for example, we trust in science. We call ourselves scientific atheists. And you talked about, the people who, the atheists under the name of atheism, they massacred, like, Mao Zedong or Stalin. We see them as a dogmatic people. They believed in communism and they believed in dictatorship, but they did not believe in science. They did not do based on science. They just believed on political motives. Now, we are science. That is why I've added the word scientific atheism. Okay, so you say you agreed honestly that you cannot content with 100% of Torah, but some, it's like five, maybe like you gave a percentage, 98%. I can defend, but 2% I cannot contend. So all right, I appreciate that honesty. Now,
Well, you should answer the
the next,
question.
yeah. So what I
Okay.
believe is, now we trust in science. Now, when we trust in science, does science answer all the questions? No. But do I have the answer from the religion that what science gives in? For example, I have a question: where did I come from? Where did humans come from? Then I look into the pages of science, and science gives me evidence on evolution. And then I go back to religion. But religion says we are created from clay, sand, or different religion has different creation stories, which does not give me any evidence. I just have to believe it.
Mhm.
But whereas science gives me evidence that I can trust. I look at the skeletal structures. I can look at the fossils. I can look at the genetic composition of humans with the Neanderthals, with primates, even our closest alive relative, we call it as chimpanzees. So when I look at the genetic similarities, I find okay, there are more possibilities for humans to evolve from a primate than to be created from a clay. So, but does science say like this is exactly where it happened? No, science is honest in that. We need to find out, because science works in a way where the more evidence we get, the more we stick to that particular thought.
Mhm.
So in
Do you
that
ever doubt
way,
your
I find
atheism?
science answers a lot of questions. So
Okay.
coming back to atheism, now that's where we think about God. Now all the religions that talks about God give some kind of picture about God, which science rejects. So on that way, I cannot believe in a God that what religion says. But at the same time, do science answer all the question? No. So, but science gives me one part, like we are all from energy matter equation is equal to mc square. Again, that's given by a Jew. I acknowledge that, Albert Einstein. So, but still, I at least get a glimpse. Okay, we come from that single point where the energy was converted into matter at some point, and then from the matter, the Big Bang happened, and then we all here by complete randomness. So, but is that energy created by a God? Then again, that could be a possibility. That's all I can say. But again, if the God comes in, the real God, if the Creator comes in, still I can study Him scientifically. I can look at him like from where he's getting his thoughts, how his circulatory system is, how his nervous system is, how does he respond, what kind of language does he use. So I can still study him scientifically. So in that way, when I think, I only can find that I can deny the God spoken by religion 100%. I can deny that. I never doubt that. But then if you tell me, okay, what if there is a God in another universe? What if some aliens created us from another universe and sent us here? Well, I don't have an answer for that. So that is where we doubt.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned evolution. So I don't see evolution as an actual blow or an actual attack to my religion, excluding the notion of common descent, right? The idea that all life developed from one common organism. That is a little harder to justify within our text, meaning that the evolutionary process could, at its inception, had a first mover, someone who got the ball rolling, and then fast forward to the sixth day to declare that this man or version of man is akin to my image, i.e., the one that resembled the image of God. Maybe this is possible, right? I mean, Darwin himself said that he had a hard time making sense of the complexity of the human eye. I mean, he actually used the word absurd. He said that it is absurd to propose that the human eye evolved through some spontaneous mutation of natural selection, really solidifying the idea that even evolution is still a theory. What really makes less sense to me, why atheists gravitate to Darwin when Darwin himself believed in God. Now, he was critical of religion, right? I mean, he called it a tribal pursuit, but God as a first cause, which is what I just said, someone who possibly got the ball rolling, this would at least make Darwin what we call a theist, for sure not an atheist, meaning that being a Darwinist and a theist is not mutually exclusive. You mentioned Einstein, that he was Jewish. Now, I don't know if you also know that Einstein also believed in God. He was not an atheist. And I think that perhaps you're not an atheist either. Perhaps you're what Darwin and possibly Einstein were, which were optimistic agnostics. Just by a simple fact that you're treating me so kindly and respectfully, it means that you just don't know or can't prove the existence of God, but you're not warring against the idea of there being a God, which is essentially what being an atheist describes. Someone who reverently announces that there is no God. Not that, you know what, I'll believe if you show me more proof or more evidence. And I think that's the camp that you would fall in.
Okay, I just want to answer your question on Albert Einstein. Yeah, Albert Einstein believed in God, but he did not believe in a Jewish God like how you believe. He never believed in a personal God. He has mentioned that very clearly. And he believes in a God of Baruch Spinoza. Again, you know about the philosopher of
Sure.
Baruch Spinoza. He's Jewish, obviously, but
Correct.
then he spoke against Judaism as well.
No. I mean, just to be accurate regarding Baruch Spinoza, he spoke against modern day understandings of Judaism. He did not speak against the Jewish Bible or the Torah.
Well, he did not agree with some God talking to Moses or to somebody who came down to Sinai. He rejected that, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, he taught something called pantheism. It's a theistic God. And that's really the God I believe in. And I believe that's the God that appears in the Torah. A God who created the world and in some way, created the world, gave over his instructions, and then stepped out. Not a God as depicted by Christians that acts like some sort of celestial butler.
Right. So even if you say pantheist, again, it is again the principles of the basic Orthodox Judaism. Yeah, God cannot be everywhere, or you cannot say
Sure.
if you believe God can be everywhere, then every God, even idols can become gods.
Well, the Torah doesn't say that either. I mean, the Torah doesn't say that either. Well, the Torah doesn't say that God could be everywhere, that God knows all your thoughts. This is what religion teaches, but the Torah itself doesn't say that.
Yeah, but that's what Baruch Spinoza said, right? The universe could be God. So that's what Einstein believed. The universe, because we come from matter, we come from energy.
And that's contrary to atheism, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's pantheism as well, because end of the day, everything that we are is from the sun, or and again, the sun is made of matters and energy, which is again.
So the two people you quoted are theists. The people you claim to be scientists. I mean, there's a whole list of scientists who were even truly deeply religious, like Isaac Newton. So it's not a mutually exclusive idea. You could believe in God and still believe in science, correct?
No, I differ from Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton lived in 17th century, so his principles are completely different. On the day when he lived, there was no evolution, and he believed he was a good Christian, and he used to go to church. And so I don't agree with Isaac Newton. But when it comes to Einstein, so he rejected all the dogmatic religions present on earth, because he said, like, none of this God, the personal God that you're talking about, a God who's interested in Jews, who interested in Prophet Moses, and spoke with him. So that kind of God, no possibility to exist. So that's what we stick to.
So that makes you an agnostic. It doesn't make you an atheist.
Okay. Again, then what is God? That is why I started the question from what is God. Then you said God is someone who gives commandments, who loves us, who
Right.
is good. So then I find him like there is no possibility of somebody living like that in some part of the universe. So that is where we are atheist. Now,
Uh,
the question
mhm.
where we cannot answer is from where it all started. That science has yet to find. Like we are into string theory. I don't know. Perhaps maybe in another 100 years we would be able to sort that out as well. But definitely, I can assure that it will be against on all the religions of the world. Like whatever the religion said till now, the science going to give a complete different answer with evidence. So that's what
Mhm.
we are waiting for. Okay, now coming to your question on evolution as well. Like Charles Darwin, yes, he was a theist, but at the same time, he at his time that he could not understand what DNA is. He never found out what DNA is. So if Charles Darwin would have lived it right now, definitely he would have been a hardcore person to reject religion. So, okay, now coming, the other question that I have to ask you
Well, that
is,
takes faith. I mean, that's a statement of faith as well. I mean, to assume that if he lived today, he'd be a hardcore atheist. But continue.
okay, so all right, now uh, you said about 6 days creation. Now, do you still believe that the human population, like it's just 6,000 years from Adam to us?
So, in terms of 6 days of creation, there's many rabbis who teach that it's not necessarily 6 days, but 6 instances. The Hebrew lends to the fact that it's more 6 instances of creation. I mean, it's illustrated as 6 days. The reason we keep the Sabbath every 6 day and not every 6 billion years is because that's how we remember God's commandments. That's how we can illustrate it and apply it on a daily level. But there's many rabbis. There's a famous physicist. His name is Gerald Schroeder. He's actually teaches in a rabbinical school in Israel. He's a religious Torah Jew. He's a physicist from MIT. He wrote a book called Genesis and the Big Bang. There are many rabbis from this frame of thinking that don't limit it just to 6 days, but perhaps 6 instances of creation. So the notion of it being more than 6 days doesn't make or break our religion. It's even uttered by King David. Now, of course, I know this is in Torah, that a day to the Lord is like 1,000 years to us. It doesn't have to necessarily be 6 days. If someone, like I said, there's many rabbis who teach it like this, thinks it's more than 6 days, they're not considered heretical in our belief system.
All right, but if that is the case, then there is a verse in the Torah that says, "So the morning and the evening were the first day." So they clearly mention what is evening. Yeah. So why do
Mhm.
you? So that's why I keep asking, why do religion have to change as per what science says? Now, for example, if I go to Rambam at his age, at his days, if I ask him, did God create it really on 6 days? Then he would count the 24 hours and he would say, yes, it is 6 days. He would never give the answer that what that MIT guy that so many millions Jews believe in a wrong version of creation, wrong version of days. And now when science finds out something, then suddenly you keep changing. And so that's not 24
Mhm.
hours of 6 days. That's 6 eons or 6 stages. So you
Mhm.
you change your religion with respect to science.
Well, not
What do you say?
necessarily.
What would
Okay.
you? How do you respond to it?
So not necessarily. It's because the Hebrew allows for it. There's some things that it doesn't allow for. The truth is, the age of the universe, and for sure the age of men, if you believe in evolution, perhaps you have different stages of how old man is on this planet, depending on what form of man you're describing. If it's a Neanderthal, there's not one answer to how old man is. Even deciding on what man you're focusing on, evolutionary science will give a different date. Some people are staunch 6 day creationists. For example, the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, the one who passed away, the head of the organization Chabad, was a 6 day creationist, and it's fine. And as a matter of fact, I lean towards that understanding that, in my opinion, which is more a 6 day notion, just ties it to keeping the Sabbath every seventh day, essentially, that we work for 6 days and rest in the seventh. But it could also be understood the other way as well. There's things that science and scientists are discovering nowadays that they didn't know. There are many theories that were put forth, scientific theories in the 70s, that are non-existent nowadays because we know more. And there's things that science don't know, like the notion of dark space. There's many things that baffle the mind of scientists. And not to mention, you mentioned the Big Bang. It's kind of hard to have a big bang without someone essentially lighting a match. But it seems that your issue is more with modern day religion, and like you said, not with the idea that there might be a God. And I'm not married to the word God. If you want to call him an alien, a supernatural force, I'm okay with that. I'm here to give you a proper representation of the God that appears in Torah. Now, there's a lot of things that appear in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that do not appear in the Torah. Notions like heaven and hell, these things don't appear in the Torah. The notions of what God is or what God isn't, these things actually don't appear in the Torah. The Torah only really lays down God's will, his instructions. It seems that the God of the Torah cares more about how you behave and not necessarily what you believe. According to the narrative in the Torah, it describes revelation. The revelation is the instructions we received from God, but that revelation didn't necessarily include the creation story and didn't include the story of the flood. All these things were compiled from legend. Fine. What makes God God to us is the notion that he's good. That means if this God was no different than any other God of the ancient world, then he would be just as disposable, as irrelevant ethically to us today as every other God of the ancient world. But by the simple fact that overall, I'm not saying in terms of being able to give a proper ethical response for every verse in the Torah, but overall, this God is unique by the simple fact that he's benevolent, he's patient, he's kind. He cared enough about humanity to give us a standard to aspire to. This makes me believe in this God and ultimately care about this God as much as it seems that he cares for me by wanting to give me a better standard to aspire to. He cared enough for us that he gave us rules to ultimately separate us from animals. So the religion of Judaism, I think it's a little more sophisticated than Islam and Christianity because it doesn't build and doesn't rely so much on faith. It relies on actions, and it really encourages the reader to put it to the test. And I think that it's no secret that it's essentially been this book, the Torah, the book that has essentially civilized the Western world. I don't know much about India. That's the main reason I remain Jewish, and I encourage other people to become Jewish because of how influential this book actually is. Now, in terms of atheistical movements, because you mentioned Mao, we have to acknowledge that atheistic non-religious pursuits have killed more people in the last 200 years than all the wars fought over religion in recordable history. At least 180 million deaths just on social democracy or communism, whatever you want to call it, from the Russian Revolution, the purges, the 40 million attributed to Stalin, 70 million attributed to Mao, 2 million attributed to Pol Pot. This is not including North Korea, Cuba, Angola, Nicaragua, Vietnam, not to mention all the state-sponsored genocides, which were essentially secular, not religious pursuits, like the Armenian genocide or the Holocaust. All these things done for non-religious reasons, and for some people have the audacity to propose an atheistical lifestyle after this track record. I think it's safer. It's safer, and I tell this to atheists all the time, that it's safer for atheistical people who are just not convinced that there could ever possibly be a God to live like there is a God for the sake of their community and their children. We know that children who grow up in households without any belief, nihilistic households that encourage walking around feeling like you're a piece of cosmic garbage, that there's no purpose in life, these kids grow up with depression. They're not very chaste. That means they sleep with the first person that shows them some compassion. Clearly, kids that grow up with religion not only are more charitable, they donate more of their time, they live richer, fuller lives. So just on that basis alone, I encourage atheistical individuals to live like there is a God for the sake of their kids. In this case, to live like Judaism is true, then God forbid having their kids become radical Muslims or radical Antifa atheists.
All right, so that was very strong. Ooh. Anyway, I would like to respond to it. Again, the atheism that we are preaching is all about scientific development and science, understanding the science, how the natural world is. Now, okay, I agree. Yes, the secular government or communist government, they kill a lot of people. But again, in the right now, if I see the people, the country that is more irreligious tend to be more developed than the country that is deeply religious. Say, for example, I take Scandinavian countries. I find people are moving away from the churches, from the synagogues, or if they're Jewish, I mean, they're more religious. They're trying to be as religious as they can be than their ancestors. And they are more developed countries. Scandinavian countries could be a good example, Norway, Sweden. But now, if I replace that scientific, because they have this critical thinking in them, they have the scientific approach in them. Now, if I replace that with you believe your dictator 100%. Say you mentioned North Korea. North Korea, they have a lesson in their school books that Kim Jong is from the sun. His family members are the planets. They have some bullshits like this, which is again, it's just they are just replacing religion with communism or their version of communism. Which, if you have scientific thinking, if you have critical thinking, you would definitely reject it. Now, coming to the religious again, the religious thinking, if you believe there is a God, then you need to, or you will also tend to believe, okay, I need to worship him. I need to, create a community where I can worship. Now, when the word the community comes in, again, there is some person who tends to mislead the people. I could quote a number of examples, like how you quoted a communist dictator, atheist dictators. I could quote a number of people who cheat poor people or illiterate people in the name of religion and make them fanatics and make them lose their money, sexually exploit them, and it is happening. Even in Israel, I've noticed, like one chief rabbi of Israel, he was arrested on bribe charges, corruption charges. So Judaism is no exception to it. So this is not about I understand this is not about being irreligious. This is about how literate you are, how good you are in critical thinking, how good you are to understand science. Now, if somebody comes and teaches me, tells me that God has instructed me to do so and so, I would say, "Okay, what is the proof?" Now, the moment I ask this, he cannot give me a proof, so he cannot misguide me. Again, you say that science, according to science, we cannot find the purpose. Well, there is a purpose. I see evolution. I see how the other social animals, an elephant, as you believe that elephant doesn't have a soul, a nephisha, an elephant which sees a small elephant, an elephant calf struggling in a mud, and the elephant is no way related to that calf. Still, it tries to take the elephant calf from the pit. So there is the helping nature I could find even in the social animals. So man and science answers. Again, this is not from somebody. I have to surrender you here, because this is again from Yuval Noah Harari, who is another Jewish origin, who gave this book, wonderful book, Sapiens. And I find that book making more sense how man created religion, how man created ideas, virtues. Why should not I have sex with my own mother? Sexual intercourse with my mother. So that is where that answers a lot of questions. Then I listen to somebody who comes to says, "Oh, this God told me don't do this. God told me do this." So that makes more sense. So if everybody have that critical thinking in them, rather than believing in something blindly or by faith, then the result is worse. That is what we take it. How do
Mhm.
you? What are your thoughts on Yuval Noah Harari? Have you read his book on Sapiens, Rabbi?
I'm not familiar with it. I'm not familiar with it. But it seems like your
Okay,
arguments are
so
more against other religions. They're not against Judaism. But I'll get to that in a second. You you spoke of Scandinavian countries. I don't know if you know that around 50, even 60 years ago, those countries were deeply religious and they weren't underdeveloped back then. What is actually occurring now is that the individuals there are actually standing on the shoulders of giants. People have to acknowledge that they're reaping the benefits. The reason they're able to consider themselves, and not all of them, but the ones that do, as ethical humanists, as even ethical atheists, is because every one of those individuals most likely had a grandparent, possibly a parent, who themselves were religious. They weren't reinventing the wheel ethically. And I would say the same for people from India. People who claim to be ethical atheists could only claim to be ethical atheists because they had a parent or a grandparent who instilled ethical values that came from their belief system. And I'm not in any way encouraging people to remain or become Hindu, right? I'm here to encourage you to become Jewish because I think it's the more reasonable, purposeful path. However, we know that these secular societies nowadays that seem to be moving out of the third world very quickly, these societies do not reproduce. They don't replace their numbers. They have to import workers in order to have individuals to pay into the system just so they can retire. That means what we see in Europe with the huge importation of refugees, religious refugees, is going to ensure that an atheistical lifestyle could not exist more than 2 generations because they don't believe in marriage. They don't believe essentially in reproduction. It destroys itself. I think that your pursuit is more of a utopian one, only because religion is not perfect. You are going to rely on a nihilistic existence. I don't think that in life things are between what's utopian and what's horrible, but the best is the enemy of the better. You typically have to pick between what's good and what's just a little better or what's not so bad. And I think that's the mature approach that many religious people have tolerated. That's the pill they swallowed when they remain religious because they see that it worked till now. And the reason that your parents chose in the vast majority of cases to even have children is because of their religious values. Now, there's a lot of problems with religion. This is why I encourage people who happen to be born in a belief system that seems a bit primitive, that seems backwards, to consider another belief system that's less primitive. I started off by saying that I think Judaism proposes the notion of people being optimists, agnostics, more than people who are blindly faithful. God understands that there's times that people are going to doubt him. It seems that the God of the Torah is more preoccupied with how we treat each other than essentially with how we treat him. This is why he doesn't put any religious tests of belief. He wants you to act. This is akin to a parent making sure that siblings treat each other well more than treating them well. I encourage people to look into Judaism. I have over 1,000 lectures online. If you go to TorahJudaism.com, you look up my name on YouTube, Asher Meza. I describe a more purposeful, rational form of Judaism. Clearly, there's different forms of Judaism. Even Islam and Christianity are types of Judaism just because they're offshoots. But I propose for people to look into Torah Judaism, a Judaism that's based essentially on the 5 books of Moses, and realize that a lot of what they dislike about religion does not appear in the Torah. It's created by man, and it's created by man to utilize the people, to take from the people.
All right, so it's going to be 11:30 soon. Then we will open it for audience. So my final question is, all right, so you said atheist, being an atheist also it makes you less interest to reproduce. To some extent, yeah, some atheists would find like, why do I have to have children? But again, science teaches us to have clone. I'll clone my own son. I'll give myself my clone. All I need is an offspring, my DNA. So even if I have a child, I have to share 50% of gene with my wife. But if I have cloned my own, it's going to be 100% of my Vasandan. I can grow him up. So science gives away. Anyways, so again, now let's open up to the audience. So thank you for coming and talking to me. Let's continue the session. Like, maybe a month once we'll have session like this.
I'm here.
I know. Okay. So I'm opening the session for the audience to come up and raise their questions. So audience, because in the comment I can see that, and also personally they have messaged me. They have some questions for you. So audience can raise their hands and they can come up. The hand raise option is open, I believe. Yeah, I just turned it on, and now the audience can come in. So audience, make your question small. I'll give you only 2 questions. First question, and then if you find that Rabbi's answer is, again, you have some doubts in that, or if you find my question is not perfect, or you have some mistakes, or you need to correct me, again, I'll give you 2 questions to ask, and then please do not, Rabbi is gonna anyway is gonna come every once in a month or twice in a month in the session on a Sunday. So you can continue, or you can even invite Rabbi to your personal rooms if you're a Hindu and you heard him talk about Hinduism. So he's willing to talk with Hindu spiritual people as well, to have a debate with them as well, or Islam is he's willing to talk with imams. But so maintain the decorum. Just two questions to atheist or to Rabbi. So the hand raise is open, please. Roland, Mr. Roland has come up. Roland, so your question is for what? To Rabbi or to me?
So for Rabbi,
Okay.
it just seems like a lot of the things you were saying just weren't really well fleshed out, right? Like when you were talking about ethics, for example, what would your response be to something like this? If I were to say that Confucianism, for example, predates Torah ethics by quite a while, and we derive things like the golden rule or things like that. And then also Vasanth was speaking about kind of how ethics can be derived from social systems in which individuals want to interact with each other equitably. And then even if we were to accept something like that, there was some earlier benefit to how ethics were presented by some of these religious systems. Do you not also think that utility can kind of lose its usefulness? For example, like how if I had an outhouse, it was a very useful way of getting rid of waste, but now we have indoor plumbing. Like, why would I still have to rely upon the system if we have better ways secularly in which to promote well-being and promote caring and use logic as a rationale for getting to these answers absent some kind of faith-based system?
Mm-hmm. For sure, there's many systems out there that propose ethical ideas. There are many laws that not only appear in the Code of Hammurabi and even in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Book of the Dead. The understanding is that we have a track record for this system working, meaning that the Bible, essentially the 5 books of Moses, is consistently ethical, or it's more consistently ethical than these other systems. No one is saying that there aren't ethical ideas in other systems, just that the West, essentially, I'm not too much familiar with the East, is built off of the biblically based system, the Judeo system, and the idea that why do we rely on something old when something new could do a better job? But that's a thing. Any new pursuit to try to reinvent the wheel ethically or to improve on the initial system has failed. Now, you can embellish the initial system. That means you can take an idea that was given in a primitive context and applied today, but you would essentially be recycling a biblical idea. You can't claim it for yourself. The Bible is limited to so many pages, and it was essentially written for a specific people at a specific time. But it's ethical enough that the founding fathers of the U.S. based their Constitution and their whole existence on the freedom to follow this book. I don't see that any atheistical pursuit has had a good enough track record to contend, at least till today, to a system that bases itself off of biblical values. I'm not saying a system cannot arise in the future, but as of today, our biggest claim is the track record that living in existence based on biblical values has provided. I don't see a system that has outdone the Bible.
I mean, you totally negated like more than 50% of the world's population when you said, I don't know about the East, and then you just kind of cited the West. But yeah, I mean,
I'm just being honest. I'm just being honest.
But don't you see how that's kind of like an argument from incredulity, that you're saying like you don't see how other systems could do a better job, and then you very honestly negated more than 50% of the world's population. I mean, much more than 50% of the world's population.
So, I mean, I'm speaking about places I know and understand, but you sound American. Are you familiar with the religion of the Aborigines or places that we don't know anything about as Americans, typically? Of course, there's places that you're not familiar with. So, I mean, you're going to speak about what you know. I'm just trying to be honest. If you want me to speak in huge generalities, I could also, but that would just make me look stupid.
No, what I'm saying is that it seems like you're making these these far-reaching claims in terms of which system works better or doesn't work better, but you're only comparing them against themselves. Like you're comparing one region that celebrates Islam versus one region that celebrates Judaism or something like that, while ignoring vast swaths of the planet that have no connection to these religions whatsoever and seem to be doing okay. And in terms of the United States, I mean, we're not founded upon, Judeo-ethical systems, right? We made a
We
very
absolutely are.
distinctive, we made a very distinctive separation between these systems to not include them within our Constitution,
Not
to remove
necessarily.
ourselves from them.
Okay,
And then
hold on.
furthermore, I think
Wait.
wait 1 second. Furthermore, I think that there's a benefit to asking questions as to why something is right or wrong, right? As to why murder should be disallowed and should be legalized against, as opposed to just saying it's because the Bible says not to do it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess
Well, let's cover point by point, because your question has many good questions, but
Yeah, so Roland, this is going to be a final question. I'm sorry,
Sure. Yep.
and I have to allow other people as well. And if somebody, Rabbi, can I? Because some people would be good in Tamil rather than in English. So if they can
No, it's fine.
ask in Tamil, I can translate them for you, and I can translate your answer into Tamil. Is that fine with you? Can I pull Tamil audience
Sure.
as well?
Just
சரி
for
யாருக்காவது let me translate, just give me a sec. So
okay,
யாருக்காவது
all right, no
தமிழ்ல
problem.
அவர்கிட்ட கேட்கணும்னு ஆசை இருந்தா கூட மேல வாங்க, நான் உங்க கேள்வி இங்கிலீஷ்ல அவருக்கா டிரான்ஸ்லேட் பண்ணுவேன். அப்புறம் அவரு சொன்னதை திரும்ப நான் உங்களுக்கு தமிழ்ல டிரான்ஸ்லேட் பண்ணி தருவேன். எனக்கு தமிழ் ஆங்கிலம் தாங்க எனக்கு பிரச்சனை அப்படின்னு நீங்க இருந்ததுன்னா தயவு செய்து மேல வாங்க. Arabaya, you can respond to Ronald.
The notion of separation of church and state in the United States was created to protect the church from the state, not the other way around. The founding fathers were deeply religious. They weren't Baptists or Pentecostals. They were what's known as theists, which still means that you're a believer in the Bible, to the point that Jefferson came out with his own Bible. That's because he was more critical of the New Testament than he was of the Old Testament. I think if conversion to Judaism was possible, and even in the Jefferson Library, they found like a few editions of the Talmud. There's a theory that he possibly wanted to become Jewish. Yes, they were theists and they were deeply religious. To think that the U.S. was founded on any atheistical ground is not to know U.S. history. Only because nowadays, unfortunately, there's a great influence of left-wing thought, an attempt to rewrite American history, for sure, to make us look more racist than we really are. Everything gets in some way reworded and retold. But I think the issue you may have with what I'm saying is I try to generalize, and I have no issue with generalizing. I think that's the foundation of wisdom, being able to group things into different segments, just be able to elect one better than the other. That doesn't mean that if I'm not familiar with every little crevice on this planet, that I have no ground for what I'm saying. I'm speaking for what I know. I mean, I know the West, essentially, and I know that it's been the Bible, the book that has civilized the West. It's not a coincidence that there are more missionaries coming from the U.S. to other places, not the other way around, meaning that people are striving to emulate our success, and our success is due to where our values came from, and that's the Bible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. Next is Bala. You have a question to me or to Rabbi?
Hi, Vasantan and Rabbi. I am following this group for a long time, so I have question for both Rabbi and Vasantan. I have so many questions, but I'll restrict myself to two. So the first question, what I
Go ahead,
like to
Bala.
ask is, Rabbi,
Can you be a bit louder? Can you be a bit louder?
Oh, is it audible now? Still the same? Oh, give me a second.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's audible now.
It's okay.
Yes.
Go.
Yeah. Okay. So Rabbi, I'm just wanted to ask, like, a religion. So is it really needed? What I understand as religion is a set of rules which helps people to channelize themselves. And is there a aim for it? Is religion maybe needed like long ago, where people were not organized and things like that? But is it in this current world, is religion really needed? That is the question I would like to ask you. And if so, is Judaism the only place, or is there any other religion people can follow? What is better in Judaism? So that's my question. And for Vasantan, you started with the question like God. So the concept of God is strict to religion is what I understand. But for atheists, there is nothing called God, and there is no set of rules. They can go by whatever they think. So it's totally opposite to a religion is what I understand. So is it like totally no rules? Is that what is called atheism? Just go seek for things and then go by what you understand? Or is it like there is set of rules, but You just have to prove to the world that there is nothing exists than the physical matter. So, is that how I should look at atheism? Thank you.
Okay, Rabbi, you want to answer first?
Sure. Before I forget the question, my memory is not too good. I think it behooves people regarding religion to at least pay tribute to where their values come from. You said, does the world need religion? We see that we don't even have to go too far back. The trail of death and carnage that societies who tried to reinvent the wheel, who tossed out religion, what they left. Did they do any better? It really creates a vacuum when you remove God. In communist China, uh, Mao's little red book in some way replaced the Bible. People would quote the Bible before, but now they were quoting Mao. It's hard to get someone to behave ethically just because you have decided on a set of ethics that are meaningful, that you think are important uh, to be kept so society could run ethically. Right when you try to impose that on someone else who also doesn't believe in God, you in some way try to make yourself God to them. If you propose your law as immutable, as unchangeable, as in some way objective and absolute. However, there's a difference when someone chooses not to murder because they believe a good God commands them not to murder. There's a big distinction to how children are raised. Will they steal something if they know they won't get caught? Just from a behaviorist perspective, you can't disagree that your children will come out better if they know that a good God is watching, is at least aware of their misdeeds done in secret. Because what's essentially wrong from an atheistical perspective if you don't get caught? Everyone adopts some religion, whether they acknowledge it or not. In the past, people would rely on statements like, thus says the Lord, while an atheist just looks at what experts say. But of course, these experts are as crooked as the pastors these atheistical kids are running away from. We have to go back to source material. We have to see what the Torah actually says, what the Bible actually says, and realize that the disdain that they have for religion, the bulk of it, is not found in source material at all. I'm not saying everything in our source material is equally palatable. There's some things we don't understand, but I think that if you would make a list of what makes sense versus what doesn't make sense, you're going to have a very small list regarding what doesn't make sense, and realize that this book, at the time it was given, was head and shoulders above everything else, which is why it has had such a great track record of working. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm trying to be honest, but it's better than nothing. And that's essentially what you'd be giving your kids if you encourage them also to follow some sort of atheistical lifestyle.
Thanks, Rabbi.
All right. Okay. To Bala's question, does atheism means set of no rules? Well, there are different branches of atheism. There could be communist atheism, there could be scientific atheism, there could be nihilist atheism, many varieties of atheism. The atheism that we are looking at, like how you have many religions, like you have monotheistic Islam, monotheistic Judaism, Trinitary Christianity, polytheistic Hinduism, like just like that, in atheism you have different thought process, different thoughts, school of thoughts. The one school of thoughts that we are keeping is keeping in the front is based on science. So when you talk about rules, our question comes, the first question that we would like to put you back again is, what rules are you talking about? Is it about social norms, or is it about the rules that you worship with God, or with your personal God? Like if he asked you to shave your head or grow beard or observe Shabbat, or set of things. Now these things, if you call these as rules, well, to us we will say this is something like, we'll just reject it. It's pure bullshit. But if you say, I'm talking about the rules, like love one another, help the poor, well, that is where science comes into picture. We find in evidence of our human ancestors going back, Neanderthals or Denisovians, it's been observed that even they took care of old people, they took care of sick people with fractures. We could find that in the evidence of our ancient even ancestors, human ancestors. And again, in Homo sapiens species, we could find in Neolithic and Paleolithic caves and many fractured bones have been taken care of. So taking care, or living as per the rules or the social norms, maintaining a social norms is instinct to us. It has become an instinct by evolution. So not having sexual attraction towards your mother is an instinct. It has become a social norm. The elephants, I look at the gorillas, I look at the chimpanzees, all the social animals, they have a particular social hereditary that they follow, or social set of rules they follow, without not anybody teaching them in the name of Torah or Quran or Bhagavad Gita or Guru Granth. So, but still they follow set of rules, like when hunting, they help each other. Of African wild buffaloes, they help, they ensure that the strong buffaloes stand outside and the young ones or the weak ones stay inside to protect them from the prey. So the set of rules, if you talk about social, if you say it's social norms, it is in our instinct. And only because of these norms, social norms, we are right now as a society, as an established, well-established species, and we are above other species. So if we lose it, if we say no, we don't need any social norms, anybody can live in the way they want, trust me, humans would have lost the race and we would have disappeared long time back. So this is how we see.
Thanks, Vasanth.
Bala, your second question.
Thank you for that. And so how would I see is like you went by instincts, and when you say instincts, some people say that in atheists we don't want children. So that is also an instinct. Is that true, or all the animals or all the species does it think that way?
See, we could find this kind of thought, like I forgot the biological name. Is found even in animals too, even in reptiles and even in mammals and birds. Like they will not reproduce if the circumstances is not good. Like for example, I catch a couple of you could check with the zoos. Many zoos, they capture exotic animals, and even though they are male and female, they will not pair with each other because they don't have the interest to mate, because by instinct they know this is not the right way to mate and have a family. It's been observed, and so they forcefully collect the semen and they do the artificial insemination process to have the kid. So having, refusing to have a child is not restricted only to humans. Even the animals have the same behavior. Even the birds observe the same behavior. Now, even though everything is there, I'm rich, I can feed for 5 generations, and I have no sexual problems, everything is working fine with me, but still I choose not to have kid. That is something like arrives, it's not instinct, but that arrives from logical thinking. Like, do I really, it's again not logical thinking, it is his personal interest. Like, do I really need to have kid? What's the point of living? What is the point of me bringing to a kid to this world which is already destroyed by pollution, plastics, or maybe if you say then this is all because of science, but then there are also rapists, there are also religious fanaticism, terrorism. So why do I have to bring a child into this cruel world? So let me just rather than let me take care of an orphan child. There are many orphans, millions of orphans in Africa, in Asia. So let me raise up one kid, and because they're already born and I can kill them. So let me raise. So that would be more logical rather than like saying no, I don't need any kid. So that would be the what more logical approach for an atheist, scientific atheist.
Thanks, Vasanth. I'll take that. And for Rabbi, what I understood is if there is no ethics, I mean, if there is no religion, there is no ethics, and that will bring a problem to the government. Like people can, if you think like you can kill anyone, you can go kill anyone. There is no God who is watching any of you. So it'll be a bigger problem to government. and still the government exists. So is still ethics a thing? There is work ethics, there is other ethics. So is still religion needed? That was what I wanted to ask.
My response was more of a code, not some fairy tale of individuals interpreting the Bible the way they see fit. The notion of a good God giving a standard that supersedes man's standard. Now, at least in America, our essential book that was the basis for declaring things right and wrong was the Bible. It wasn't that the government meted out laws just the way they saw fit. Nowadays, it's more secular. And because it's more secular, it's become more immoral. It's hard for me to imagine somebody looking to animals as a standard for the way that we should act. I mean, have you seen animals, how they treat not just those outside of their species, but even those within their species, eating their young? If a pony is straggling, the head of the pack will kill it right away. I said earlier that the Torah, that God's word was there to elevate us from the animal. My friend is here encouraging us to look towards the animal as a way to behave, but I don't think animals behave better than people, even without a God. Sounds absurd.
Okay, Rabbi, I have some question from the chat. I could find Nee Grosteen. So he has asked a question to you, like the Jewish laws you keep talking about. It says Torah asks you to love one another, help one another. Now, but it is all for Jews, not for Gentiles. Yeah, so that's what he has mentioned. What is the question?
The law is for everybody. In terms of ethical law, there are certain ceremonial laws that are for the children of Israel alone. But we see that God punishes people in the Torah who murder, who steal, who are not Jewish. Now, the word Jewish doesn't even appear in the Torah, but are from a Hebrew pedigree. We see actually at Mount Sinai that there stood a mixed multitude of people. It says that they were Hebrews, they were Israelites, and then there's something called the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav means a mixed multitude of peoples. Now, it's true, later on, this group in some way gets absorbed and becomes part of Israel, but it shows that the law is for everyone. God expects everyone to be ethical. Now, there's some ceremonial laws, like dietary laws, that he requires people who are in a covenant with him to keep. But regarding ethical behavior, he expects that from everybody.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mr. Karkish has come up. Karkish, you have a question? To whom?
Yes,
To
I
me or
have
to
a
Rabbi?
question.
To me or to
To
Rabbi?
the rabbi, please.
Okay.
To the rabbi. Yeah. So, just one question, Rabbi. In the Torah, there is one regressive verse which, kind of relates to what's happening in India these days. So, I just want to ask, how you guys overcame that, or how was it abrogated? Because obviously the Jews are not following that to the T, and the verse is relating to the desecration of idols and temples, which is the hot topic right now in India, and it's happened in the last 300 years, 400 years, several times. And if we go back in history, it comes from a verse in Quran, which is basically plagiarized from the Torah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you know which verse I'm talking about. It's basically about giving a symbol or giving an idol to God, right? And that one is I can't recall the verse, but basically. It's against idolatry, right? Torah.
Correct.
And also
Correct.
there is one, just to finish it off, okay, it's fine. Each religion can have their own, rules and regulations. But here it is actually propagating violence, this particular verse. It's saying, those who are, giving a symbol or an idol to God, something like that, can be destroyed. Right, so then you're propagating violence. It's one thing to just say, avoid them, or it's, he's not a Jew, or giving a symbolism to God is wrong, or those things are fine as long as there's no propagation of violence. Yeah, so that's my question. Thank you.
Okay. I mentioned before that although God doesn't make a distinction between laws, there's laws that are only applicable in the land of Israel, and then there's laws that he expects everyone to keep, essentially the ethical laws. The difference is that people living in the land of Israel make an agreement with God that before they enter this land, they're not going to bring any idolatry, they're not going to desecrate the Sabbath. It's an arrangement. This is why it's called a covenant. A covenant is an agreement that, in this case, the Israelites and the mixed multitude are making with God before they enter the land. That means it's not for everybody. There's no command anywhere for an Israelite, for a Jew, to enter anyone else's country and start breaking idols. This is what Islam does because they have a global vision of some caliphate that Judaism doesn't have. Judaism limits it to the borders of Israel. Now, of course, we can expand those borders. It's not a global vision to take over the world. The understanding is that the world will come to us, not that we go to the world and destroy their idols. In terms of actually destroying them, I don't think there's a verse in the Torah that talk about that, but it talks about doing away with people who bring you to worship their foreign gods. But this is only within the land of Israel. Israelites, Jews in America, anywhere in the world, don't ever try to desecrate a temple they would deem idolatrous or a mosque or anything like that, because there's no obligation to do so. The only obligation is in the land of Israel, and it's truly in the land of Israel when we're properly redeemed. That means right now the state of Israel is a secular country. It's not a religious country. The vast majority of Jews living in the land of Israel are not religious. I would say maybe 90% of them are not religious. We're still considered in exile, even though we have a state of Israel. The understanding is that once we have a temple with a king and a priest and a court, then we can put these practices like eradicating witches from within our borders, things like that. We could put that into play. But the truth is, being that it's an arrangement that we have to make, an agreement we have to make with God before we even enter the land or decide to remain in the land, anyone who chooses to practice idolatry at a time when there's a court and a magistrate and a priesthood, they're putting their lives in jeopardy. We welcome those people to leave the land, assuming, again, there was a temple, i.e., in biblical times, because it's not tolerated in our country. But not everyone is forced to live in our country. It's really not the same as what Islam does, that they will invade somewhere and then start torturing their inhabitants or forcing them to convert to Islam. Judaism doesn't do that.
Karkesh, your second question.
No, I just had only one question, Vasanta.
Okay. So, yeah, and, I don't find any other questions. All right. Okay. So let's wind up the session then. It's going to be 3 a.m. for you, right? There, Rabbi. Yes? 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Jai Hind.
All right. So thank you so much. So next time what we'll plan is perhaps we'll have in the evening for us, Indian time evening, so you can have it in the morning. Perhaps we will have a lot of people coming and asking us questions, because when we conduct there is one more group as well called Torah, Learn Torah in Tamil, like it's for Tamil audience. So many people come there and ask questions, and Yaakov cannot answer those questions because of the time limit. So he has to go away. So perhaps we'll next time when we have next session, we'll have it in the evening Indian time. So you can also spend a lot of time, and we can also invite a lot of people. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation and participating for almost 2.5 hours and answering our questions. And this discussion is on record, so people who have missed the session, early part of the session, or just now joined, you can listen to our recorded version in the replay. So thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you for all audience who came up and asked the questions. And I'm closing the session now. 3, 2, 1.